Trove's combat and how you build classes can be broken up into 3 categories. Speed farming, where you're trying to complete dungeons as fast as possible, which means you need to have a class that has a good base movement speed and you will be sacrificing damage for more speed. Delves, which is a combination of damage and health. In most cases, you need to be really tanky to be able to survive the long, drawn-out gauntlet. And Leviathans are all about damage. You don't need to survive if you can kill it before it kills you. The efficiency of a class can basically be broken down into these 3 categories. Some will be stronger than others in one area and weaker in another. Another video of mine that I would recommend is the classes cheat sheet. It's basically a visual graph that kind of shows where each character fits in the spectrum. At the end of it all, I would always recommend that you play the class that you enjoy, rather than picking something specifically because it's efficient. So assuming you've picked out your main, let's get started with the more detailed tutorial. The Candy Barb is actually one of the better starting classes in the whole game. His hits pack a punch, and on top of that, he's also got really good crowd control. He ends up being a good class for speed farming because of his crystal ring ability, and then on top of that, he can also handle delves quite well. One of the big reasons that you'll see at least one Candy Barb usually around the end game though, is because his ultimate ability will end up giving attack speed to all nearby classes. It's not really something that's super important for those of you watching this video, but for the most part, I'm just trying to get the point across that Candy Barb has utility as well as function. So subclass abilities are kind of unanimously always going to end up being the same. You'll probably want to go for Sorta Crazy, the Lunar Lancer subclass, because basically when that randomly triggers, you'll go big and you'll deal a lot more damage, have a lot more attack speed, so on and so forth. The passive ability also gives you some extra physical damage. I like using Knight subclass ability just because the mount movement speed and the extra flask capacity does give me longer survivability and a pretty significant amount of extra damage, but Solarian is also going to end up being one of the best in the game just because of that extra light value you get out of it. Now for your gear stat priority, you're going to focus on attack speed. You want to get your attack speed as close to 300% as possible because that's the soft cap. Anything above that is just visual. It doesn't change anything function wise, but movement speed would be if you're just trying to speed farm, crit damage instead of movement speed if you need to have that extra damage on the class. In most cases, I would say movement speed would be ideal, save for if you're on PC or soon consoles, hopefully the newest difficulty, U12/U15 as we're calling it, does beg the question of movement speed, is it still valuable? In most cases, not really. The reason being that you need to have as much damage as possible, but I don't know whether or not people would want to main the Barb when it comes to doing U15 difficulty. Now, there are the 3 different crystal ring abilities, but the only one that you're going to be focusing on is Spin to Win, which it says reduces the energy cost of Swirlwind and removes the movement speed reduction. It also seems to give you a movement speed boost, or maybe it's just because of the way that the game's coded, it just makes you move a lot faster. Instead of reducing movement speed, it's actually like increasing your movement speed to compensate for that reduction. I'm not sure how it works. I just know you zoom when you have Spin to Win active. Best banner and slot, in my opinion, is always going to end up being the Leviathan torches, and the permatorch that I use is the Knotted Shadow one. Your best ally and slot in most cases is going to end up being Scorpius because it'll end up giving you the physical damage, the light, and the movement speed. But if you can actually manage to get it, I don't have it yet, the mini fire beast is going to give you a little bit more bang for your buck in terms of your damage. So for Scorpius, you're going to come to the hub, go over here to the Grand Orrery, and it's going to end up being located here on this node. Meanwhile, the mini fire beast is going to be underground here, where the mystic arts are, and this crafting table all the way in the collections, it's going to be right here and cost various resources. Now, looking at the overall skill tree, there's going to end up being a few nodes that you want to specifically focus on. My recommendation would be the Life Leech node, the Movement Speed node, the Light nodes, and the Damage nodes. I also gave you some nice color coding, so you can always just take a screenshot of this. Now, for your flasks, these are pretty much going to be the best flasks in the game. You can kind of just pick your poison at this point. I always just use Death Defying because everything hits so hard that you usually get one shot regardless. But at the end game, you will have a pretty decent amount of extra max health. So Death Defying isn't always the big one that everybody else suggests. I'm just giving my own personal opinion. Otherwise, in most cases, people will say Conjurer's Crucible Vial because it can end up refilling the flask as you trigger Magic Find if you have a high enough Magic Find. As for the emblems, those are going to change, except for Martial Emblem. The reason why Martial Emblem and even Arcane Emblem are invaluable is because now that we've slowly gotten more and more endgame areas added into the game where the enemies are just so ridiculously tanky, there's no reason to ever get rid of these because of the raw damage it supplies. Other options would be Trailblazing if you're trying to do speed farming, Unyielding if you need that extra bit of survivability, or Chromatic Emblem if you're struggling to use your ult more often to boost up your teammates. Sure Strike, I should also mention, is going to end up being one of the best ones early on until you end up having your crit hit at around 100%. Speaking of stats, your mid-game stats should be aimed at 80,000 physical damage, 50 to 60% crit hit, and 800% crit damage. Obviously, you want to have a lot more than that moving forward, but crit hit in particular, you want to get to 100% and then try to kind of keep your physical damage and your crit damage in line. You don't really need to, as I'll explain momentarily. Before we move on to gems, as always, I do gotta mention, are you level 30? That's the big question I always gotta ask you guys, because so many times I got people asking me, how do I increase my PR? And then they're not even max level. Max level needs to be your priority before you even think about focusing on gems and power rank. I also don't have max coefficiency, and frankly speaking, I don't care. That's not what this video is about. I'm trying to make this as digestible to you guys as possible. Now, for the sake of my gems, I have all of them on my boomeranger, so I've swapped to my boomer. And I also, again, because I want this to be very, very readable for you guys, I'm going to end up going by a 3x3 for your lesser gems. So you're gonna have 3 of your lesser gems with 2 pearls crit damage, 1 pearl physical, no pearl crit hit, with the other 3 lesser gems being 2 pearls physical damage, 1 pearl crit damage, and no pearls into crit hit, up until you get to 100% crit hit, and then you can cycle crit hit off of your gems in favor of max health. If you have some gems that have 3 pearls in crit damage or physical damage, again, it doesn't really matter that much. You're just trying to have kind of a nice balance between them. But if you notice that you're like significantly weaker than you should be, well, frankly speaking, you might need to change your gems up a bit. As for your empowered gems, those are going to end up being 2 pearls physical, 1 pearl crit damage, no pearls crit hit. As for the elemental gem ability, Pyro Disc is a must just because of the movement speed. For your third gem though, it's kind of up to you. Spirit Surge I've heard is good, but I don't really have that much experience with it. Cubic Curtain can be really helpful just because it'll give you a lot more survivability, but again, it's not super important what that third gem is. Moving on to your cosmic gems. Those are going to have all pearls in the light stat, with the next stats being no pearls into physical damage and crit damage. And then for the Cosmic Empowered Gem, you're going to want to have either Vampiric ability, which will give you a lot more lifesteal, which you don't really need at that point, but more importantly, it'll give you movement speed. Or if you are going to be going into this true end game of U15/U12, then you would use Berserk Battler just because it's going to give you a lot of light. Now, lastly, I did want to bring up why this video took so long. Frankly speaking, I got sidetracked. You know, I was planning on having this video for you guys, and then the test server opened, so I got busy with that. And then suddenly the update was live, so I got busy with that. And then the Elden Ring DLC hit, and I got busy with that. Now, I'm still playing Elden Ring, but the content is definitely going to slow down a lot, and I can kind of get back into the swing of things because I was seriously losing sleep over playing it. I had a lot of fun with it though. And again, I do still plan on covering that game, but my point being is now that I've kind of finished it, I can slow down, kind of get back into the swing of things with all the Trove stuff. So you can expect more live streams, and hopefully I'll be able to have these videos at a more regular pace for you guys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it for me. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe as you end up heading out. If you want to see more videos like this, YouTube recommends this option right here, or you can check out my most recent upload right over here. Now, I did mention my distraction with Elden Ring, but I actually planned on having this uploaded like a couple days ago, but I ended up feeling really ill, which is why the only videos that have been going up on the channel have been stream VODs.